In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code THEWAYFORWARD for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here. Jesse Elder is a speaker, mentor, entrepreneur, and all-around lover of life. He has devoted his life to sharing his principles of self-mastery with people all across the world. Through his popular Mind Vitamin videos, online courses, events, and private coaching, Jesse teaches others how to create their own success and fulfillment, reclaim their personal freedom, and master their reality. In this episode, we discuss Jesse's journey of becoming what he calls an action philosopher, as well as his powerful technique called time piercing. I want to keep this intro short and to the point because anything that I say here is not going to do this conversation justice. So, the magical conversation that Jesse and I had just needs to be heard in and of itself. I won't do it justice, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut this intro shorter than I usually do and turn it over to the episode with Jesse. For more on him, please be sure to head to the links in the show notes. I know you'll enjoy this episode, so I don't even need to say enjoy, but enjoy. What do you remember about this episode?
Oof, that's a good question.
I've been waiting to ask you that all day.
Yeah. I see this being a collaboration that is in response to a tremendous amount of requests that people have that they're not even aware of. And so in a lot of ways, this will be the answer to people's prayer. And I think it'll come to us and through us as we're riffing. And I've come to think of the purest content creation is like that. Like, it's like we're the straw and here's this immense need. And sometimes it's relief. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's, specific things that people are looking for. And they're just in this like magnetic, they're just drawing it to them. And then there are people who are messengers and they're conduits, and through their own lived experience and distinctions and communication, whatever, they get ideas that come from wherever ideas come from. We'll riff on that, but they tap into a certain amount of clarity and frequency, and then they get an idea, and then they share the idea, and then this person connects with that idea. It is exactly the thing that they needed. And it's just this amazing dance where like the request from the person who wants the answer comes to the person who's in service to communication. And so that idea comes to them, goes out to the person, and it's this fucking endless dance of just request and answer. So I just imagine I'm a DJ and I'm just taking requests. So
that's awesome.
The ideas come in. I'm like, oh, that's a good one. So,
all the best DJs that can mix too are able to on the fly, even though they have their set list, they're like, okay, I can take requests and somehow try to fit that one.
And just read the room, or read the vibe, read the energy, and you can just kind of tell where people are at. And I've become good friends with some next level just architects of sound, and just to watch them watch the group and feel the space, and then just see them go, nope, this, and it's just riding. So
yeah, man. Yeah. The prayers that people are putting up that may be listening or watching this episode, what are you thinking is or what are you feeling is the type of prayers they're putting up?
Yeah, I think there's there's generally two ends of the spectrum that people are playing in. There's the like super hustle culture, very Western, very late stage capitalism, very masculine, very outcome oriented, go, 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 go. But the metrics become confused because it becomes dollars and horsepower and square footage and all of that. And then there's a sort of drifting away from their own authenticity. And so for people who are playing the financial game at a really high level, there's this sort of gnawing of like, this isn't really who I am. And for a lot of people in that space, they end up going to do ayahuasca and then, burn their business to the ground. And it doesn't have to be that way, but they're looking for reminders, as simple as it sounds. They're looking for reminders that they are enough, and that who they are is enough, and that they're inherently worthy. They're intrinsically valuable, and they get to then express that value through their business and their work and what they do. So I think that's a big request for people that are sort of playing on that end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that are, like the starving artists, and they're like salt of the earth people, and they're really tapped into their purpose, but they haven't found traction in the marketplace, or they haven't found a way to really find their voice and express themselves more powerfully. And so for that group, and I realize these are generalizations, but for that group, it tends to be just basic empowerment. Like you've already got this something good. So like a little bit of courage, a little backbone, like just fucking go out there, put yourself out there more, be ready to fail with a smile on your face. And I've observed the greatest value happens for each of those groups when they realize they're actually the same. They're just playing on different ends of the spectrum. So the people that are winning, by most accounts, the financial game, and they reconnect to their heart, and they reconnect to their soul and their authenticity. And all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, now it's like they're rocking. And then same thing here. These folks are very authentic. They give you the shirt off their back. They're just so loving and so giving. But when they find traction in the marketplace, and they find traction in the world, and they, sometimes it's just like they raise their fees, or they quit working in the sort of, moonlighting gig that they were doing, and they open up their own thing.
Or stop the limiting patterns of belief that usually come from the starving artist sort of space, where it's like, money is bad, I shouldn't make money.
Exactly. And money's just fuel, man. It's a terrible finish line, but it's a wonderful fuel. So
I think those two ends of the spectrum, I look at them as like pendulums, right? Where like I think there's so many things in our life that we're on these pendulums, and I even look at that from a like psycho-emotional perspective of, I won't say that I tend to stray away from feeling intense amounts of joy. It's just that I have the awareness that oftentimes when there's like intense, I'm talking like very, very intense, almost bliss states of joy, that the way this reality tends to work, or maybe that's a projection of my own mind, I don't know, I'd like to hear your thoughts, is that I will pendulum back the other way and then have a deep, I won't say depressive state because I'm like aware of it now, but I will go through some hours or days of feeling a little bit low after that intense joy. And it's like trying to come back to a very steady middle pendulum balance point. And relating that back to, I'd like to touch on that. That's another thread we can pull on, but relating it back to what you just said about the starving artist type, and then the super go, like money hungry, like, winning mentality. I think of like, a lot of the self-help space is sort of becoming that, but you embody the middle approach perfectly. And what has it taken you to get to that point?
Lots of time on either end of the spectrum.
So I was correct in my pendulum assessment.
Yeah, big time. I mean, I was born in Austin, first oldest of 5. And my parents made what I found out later, made what turned out to be, as far as I'm concerned, the most incredible decision that a parent could have made. And according to their stories, which line up, they've told me these on different occasions, that when I was born, they looked at me and they just said, we think that this soul knows what he needs more than we do. And so we're just going to love him, but we're going to stay out of his way. And as a result of that, I never went to school. I never sat behind a desk.
Can you emphasize that too? Because there's never went to school, but there's never went to school.
Yeah, I never sat behind a desk. I've never taken a test. I've never gotten a grade. I don't know what it's like to raise my hand to ask permission to go to the bathroom. And ironically, my dad is a school teacher.
Wow. I didn't know that part.
Yeah. So he'd come home with all these books. He taught 7th and 8th grade math and Spanish, primarily. He taught a lot of things, but so he'd come home and there'd be all these books on the kitchen table. And I remember being, like 5, 6, 7 years old, and my dad just saying, these are all for you to read. You read whatever book you want. And then he'd just walk away. And I remember the feeling of that was one of my earliest feelings of wealth and abundance. It's like, I can read any of these books. And I felt so free and so excited. And I didn't realize till years later what a clutch move that was on his part, because I got the experience of freedom, but he's the one that chose the choices. Mm. And so all the books that were there was like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Wow. I mean, it's just like epic stuff. And, we didn't have a TV. We had a little tiny black and white TV, but it was back when there was 3 channels and, you could only get one if there's like the hanger was in just right and you stood a certain way. So I had a very, I would say very embodied childhood where there was tons of love, felt pretty safe for the most part until I was about 9 and some other stuff happened. But even that was fantastic. So I had I just had time. I had hours and hours and hours every day to do whatever I was interested in. And there was this wonderful relationship between freedom and responsibility. So every time, as I was growing up and there was other freedoms that I would want to have, like, I want to ride my bike to the mall, not just around the neighborhood, or I want to stay up late and watch Saturday Night Live, when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And so every time I would want a new freedom, the question was always very lovingly, but very clearly, what is the responsibility that you're going to take on so that you can have this freedom?
Is this an ask of your parents, or would you ask yourself this?
Yeah.
Ask of your parents?
Oh yeah. I was oblivious. I'm like, right. I just want it. I want it.
What an
incredible
question.
It shaped my entire life. Yeah. I mean, it's become a huge basis of my philosophy now. And a lot of what I teach with clients and students and courses and everything else is that freedom is born from responsibility. And anytime somebody's experiencing a lack of freedom in their life, it's always the result of a lack of responsibility somewhere. And the greater responsibility someone's willing to take on, the more freedoms they end up getting. And so I got to have this childhood where I'm, riding to the library, loading up on books in a backpack, ride home and just tear through these books. And there was never anything that I was guided to read. There was never anything like, hey, you need to read this. You should read this. It was always like, you do you, man. And not only did that keep my love for learning alive, which every child has, but it made me love the process of learning. And I got it connected in my brain pretty quickly that when I was frustrated because I didn't know something, I had the experience enough times early on that resulted in seeking resources, finding answers that would then lead to these epiphanies and understandings. And now I know. And after a while, I couldn't accept anymore that frustration was a static thing. Frustration, confusion is really just pre-clarity. Like it led me to this place where when I got frustrated, I'd automatically get giddy and I'd get excited because I was like, oh shit, I'm about to figure something out.
Wow.
And so that repeated all the way through. I mean, it continues to this day, but when I was 9, our family moved.
Keep going, because I'm not gonna edit this out either. I'm gonna take some notes because there's some things. There's so many threads I want to pull in there.
Cool,
Keep going.
Cool. So I when I was 9 years old, there's now 2 of my brothers had been born. I was the only one born in a hospital. Actually, everybody else was born at home. So I was at home and watched all my siblings be born, which is an incredible experience. And when I was 9 years old, our family moved, my mom, my dad, my 2 brothers and me, and we moved from San Antonio, where we were living at the time, to the Valley, to Harlingen, just outside of Harlingen in the Rio Grande Valley. And my dad took on a job as a director for a halfway house for Central American refugees. So this is in the early 80s. And the landscape in El Salvador and Nicaragua and Guatemala was really brutal. There was a lot of civil war. It wasn't even civil war. It was complete institutionalized destabilization that was happening. And so there was these death squads that were roaming the countryside, terrorizing people, kidnapping them, disappearing them, torturing them. And so, thousands of them are fleeing for their lives. So this is not an economic refugee situation. They're literally, if they stay, they're going to die. So there's a whole movement started in the United States called the sanctuary movement, which is very different than the sanctuary cities that we're seeing now. Totally different. There's
benevolence behind it, you could say. Back then.
It was really just people opening up their homes and taking care of these people who have been tortured, have been, it was really rough. Yeah. So my dad took on this job, and we moved to this little trailer on this 2-acre dirt lot that was owned by the Catholic diocese. It was next to this house that the church owned, and that's where these people would come. And that's a whole other conversation by itself. But while we were down there, one of the things that I took an interest in was martial arts. And I always wanted to try it. And so I took a class, immediately fell in love. I was like, I can remember everything, the way the uniform smelled and feeling awkward and like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And just really getting into martial arts. And that proved to be wildly therapeutic and useful during the turmoil of those couple of years, because it became the sanctuary movement became a huge political football. My dad ended up getting arrested. He ended up he was acquitted in a federal trial, but was very adamant, very outspoken that he's not going to stop doing this. Mm-hmm. That if this is a crime, then it's a crime of conscience, and he's not, given the choice between not doing it and not following his principles, or doing it and disobeying federal law, he's going to do that. So it was an intense time. I mean, there was a lot of ton of media. There was a lot of lawyers hanging out. There was this real sense of impending doom, because he could get arrested again. And I spent enough time staying up past my bedtime and eavesdropping on all the legal conversations, and I'd learned that a guilty count is 6 or 7 years federal time. And as it turns out, he did get arrested again. He was this time was found guilty, and I was in the courthouse. We were all there. It was packed.
How old were you at this time again?
I was 10. And I was 10 years old. It was one of the most vivid memories I have, and probably what led me to a lot of spiritual growth, personal development, understanding beliefs, is because of the trauma of that day. I mean, I was 10 years old. I can still remember the wooden, courtroom seats, and the foreman of the jury comes out, tells the judge that the jury, have found the defendant, Jack Elder, my dad, guilty. And then they start going through the guilty counts. This one. And my little 10-year-old brain is doing the math. And I'm like, that's 7 years. That's 14 years. That's 21 years. And as I'm doing the math, I remember feeling like whatever emotion would be called beyond terror, beyond panic.
Right.
Like, oh shit. And it kept racking up the counts. And all of a sudden my 10-year-old brain made that mean I'm never going to see my dad again.
Yeah.
And, as tight as our family was and as close as our family was. And I remember like something snapped inside of me, and I grew up emotionally that day.
Yeah.
Like that moment. It was like the walls came up, and what I made it mean is that I need to be the man of the house because my dad's not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to take care of my mom and my brothers. My sister hadn't been born yet. As it turns out, he ended up getting 6 months in a halfway house in San Antonio.
Instead of the 21
Instead
years.
of, it would have been like 40, 50 years.
Wow.
Because it was like, I think it was 5 or 6 counts.
My goodness.
But it was a very hot political issue. The judge, even though it was a very conservative judge in a conservative jurisdiction, it was in Houston. But it was, here's this family guy, he's a school teacher. He,
right.
Went to a Catholic university up Northeast. I mean, he's not a bad guy.
Right.
And so I guess the political, powers that should not be. Whole other conversation.
I love how you hesitate there because I also refuse to call them that.
Yeah, it's like
because they're not. It's all based on our collective belief
illusion.
that they are. But
it's total illusion. Total illusion.
For lack of a better term or phrase.
Yeah. So anyway, they gave him 6 months in a halfway house in San Antonio, and they let him out a month early if he promised not to tell the press because they just did not want to deal with it. So as it turns out, my worst fears never came true, and then it took me some time to realize the damage that had been created from that experience and mine the gold and repair things with my dad because there's a lot of anger that was there. And once that was done, it was like, oh, what a gift and what a gift. And so this then led to avidly training martial arts, got my black belt when I was 15. I started teaching. And by the time I was 17, I was running most of the classes for my instructor's school. And I was 17 years old. I told my parents, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Yeah. And in typical elder fashion, they were like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, you do you.
Incredible.
The one conflict that I had with my dad was he wanted me to get my GED. And so there was a GED book that appeared and he was like, you need to get that done.
Was that coming from a perspective that you may not be able to get a job or employment in the future unless you had a GED at the least?
I think it was that may have been in there. I think it was more so it'll be easier for you to do this now than to go back and do it later.
Got it.
You should probably do this now. And that was the only thing that I recall there being some pressure towards. There was a lot of encouragement for other things. Like, hey, you should learn Spanish,
right.
and I'd be like, I wasn't totally interested. I could see the value, but it felt to me like I have to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to do it. And I ended up not getting my GED and just basically telling my dad, like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to get my GED.
Well, it's also that they had cultivated that self-responsibility in you and self-directed
it's
learning.
Kind of like, what do you
it's
expect?
Like, yeah, what do you expect after all this? But was there any element of you that because your dad, both your parents fostered an environment of such freedom and responsibility for yourself that when he said, hey, GED, it was like, this is really the first time my dad's pressuring me to do something, maybe I should do it? Or was it instantly because you've cultivated such freedom and responsibility in yourself that was like, no?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember vividly opening up the GED book and immediately feeling like an idiot. Like none of this makes sense to me. And all I'd really ever had was doing things that interested me.
Yeah.
There was definitely things that they imposed. There was like, you're going to volunteer one morning a week at this, it was called the Catholic Worker House in San Antonio. I hated those days. Like I would like Ferris Bueller lick my palms. I'm just like, no, I can't today. I was a total baby about it. But they were like, it doesn't matter. Like you're going to do this. This is non-negotiable. So there's definitely things like that, which of course, like some of the best experience of my life, So there was that. But I remember looking at that GED book and like the math, the all of it just seemed foreign to me.
You didn't like think that the quadratic formula would be really important in your life?
I'm going to use this in a fight. Exactly.
And you formed your entire business around the quadratic formula. Yeah, everyone knows that.
Everybody knows that. And so I just basically it was procrastination, but it again that led to other theories that later that were confirmed for me and clients and students that sometimes procrastination is like a sort of spiritual self-defense. It's like your higher self, your soul. It's like, no, man, that's not for you. Like if it's for you, you'd be into it,
Right.
and you're not into it. So it's not for you. And, I kept teaching, kept training, kept competing, and, moved out when I was 17. I was working for my instructor and making enough money to get some roommates and pay rent, and had a car. And I was like, this is all I want to do, man. I just want to teach, train. And throughout all of this, I was, there's a lot of loneliness. I was incredibly socially awkward, like cripplingly socially awkward when it came to girls. Like there's no way. And I've had people ask me in different interviews and conversations, do you think that was because of homeschooling? Not at all. Not at all. It was my own awkwardness.
You weren't even homeschooling anyway, though. But
yeah, it's total
self-directed.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some other funny I mean, they're funny now, but I can see how it was like a perfect storm of things that happened to lead to this. So the thing in the courtroom, and I kind of grew up emotionally, and then ended up moving into a position of, I don't want to say authority, but responsibility, right. Teaching. I'm the oldest of 5. So there's a lot of, connection with siblings and babysitting. And then, so I'm increasingly confident in terms of teaching and being in a position of responsibility, and it felt comfortable. And I kept challenging myself or being challenged in those areas. Meanwhile, I think this will be on topic. If it's not,
everything's on topic. Everything's on topic. Go there.
Well, so this is like hindsight 2020. So I've got this, I'm 15. I'm expanding pretty rapidly in terms of confidence and communication skills and teaching and all of that. So the forward facing life just keeps getting better and better. Privately, I hit puberty, and now I'm just like, oh, this fucking chemical storm. You're just like, what do I do? This is incredible. Right at the perfectly worst time as I'm entering puberty, teaching. So I'm getting all this attention and position of responsibility. The universe has such a sense of humor. My best friend at the time, his name is David. I'm not going to say his last name in case he's never told this story. So he lived in Pleasanton, and we were both homeschooled, both 5 kids in our family, just buddies. And so we'd go down to visit them. They'd come up to visit us, and there was a wonderful homeschooling community. So he and I are just bumping around Pleasanton, Texas. And it's the middle of the day. We're the only kids there. The cops know that we're the word homeschool kids. So we just basically had the town to ourselves. Everybody else is in school. And we were riding our bikes, and we were like running through trails, and we used to play around the cemetery that had like a park next to it. And it was like Tom Sawyer childhood, we're like making traps and we're fishing. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's incredible.
This still, I've told the story a couple of times. It still blows me away how perfectly, hilariously terrible it was. We're running down this trail, and I'm a little bit of ahead of him, and I'm running up and down, and you're a kid, you're like 12 years old. You've just got this full on imagination. And we're running, and I'm running, and I trip on this root, and I wipe out. Not bad, but I was on the ground. He's still way behind me. Right where I fell, this is insane, was right next to this big giant tree, and the roots were all like hollowed out, and there's all this like, it wasn't a cave by any stretch, but you're a 12-year-old kid, and I'm right next to this hole that seems like it goes in forever, and I'm literally laying there. This hole is right in front of my face where I happen to fall, and I look and I see something inside this like crevice. And now my buddy comes up and he's like, what is it? I was like, dude, there's something in there. I just make out a shape. So of course, 12 years old, I reach my hand in there, like up to my shoulder, and it's a bag, like a grocery bag. Whoa. And I'm like, wow. So I pick it up, and it's heavy, and I pull it out. And it's like probably 15 pounds. Yeah. And we're like, what is it? And we're just like, our imagination is like, what is it? It was like hidden in there. So we open it up. And for 2 12-year-old boys, it was as if angels started singing, because it was a stack of porn magazines, like literally this thick. And now we're like, oh, oh my God, we're like freaking out.
Yeah.
So we're like, nobody's around.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, we've got like porn spread everywhere on this trail. Like, and it was like
In this small
Playboys,
town in
Penthouse,
Texas.
Hustlers. And we're just like,
Right.
Our teenage biology, preteen biologies are freaking out. It's like chemical storm. And we're like, all right, how do we get these back to your house? So we divided them up. We stuck like 3 down our pants. We tucked him into our jeans. We walked back into his house like the Michelin Man.
Yeah.
And his mom's like, hey, boys, you want to sit down and have lunch? We're like, nope.
We gotta go.
So we go into his room, locked the door, drew the blinds, and we divided up the treasure. And so he got his stack, I got mine. And it was mind-blowing, like mind-blowing. And so I am pubescent. I have this stack of porn. I don't need to say what my nights, evenings, showers looked like. And then I'm teaching.
Yeah.
Full on, publicly, like becoming more responsible, more, more confident, just getting tons of reinforcement for, that people love the classes and they're getting so much benefit. And then I've got this, private life of just total, masturbation, which is not uncommon. And I have no shame
Especially
about
as a
any
teen,
of it.
but still it was like a split in like, who I am publicly and who I am privately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then in the middle of that is my heart, because there's just like, I got to see my parents have such a wonderful relationship, and I got to have that modeled. It's like very traditional roles. He's out there handling the world and she's in here taking care of the family, and they just intersected beautifully. And it was incredible. And so then, of course, I have a very strong imprint of what a relationship looks like. I have all sorts of idealistic views of what a relationship should be like. I've got all the public sort of need meeting behavior of teaching and contribution. And then I have this private, ridiculously unreasonable, unrealistic set of experiences. And it just kept going like that.
Wow.
Where I would see a girl that I would just think was so cute, so beautiful, but I wouldn't know what to say.
Wow.
And so that part of my development got stalled. Meanwhile, I've got the immediate gratification over here.
Right.
And then I've got the soul nourishment and connection and community of teaching. And that gap just getting wider and wider and wider. Now, it really never went any farther than that. I mean, I'm very appreciative. I never got into anything crazy, weird, whatever. No judgment for that, as long as it doesn't involve kids.
Right.
Like whatever y'all into, you're into. But the need and the yearning for connection and for relationship was so intense, and it just multiplied a sense of loneliness that I'd felt my whole life. And a lot of this I didn't really unpack until, years later. But I remember being a kid with this awesome family that I'm in, but even as young as probably 8, 9 years old, maybe earlier, because before we moved to the Valley, probably 7, 8 years old, I remember feeling like laying in bed and just feeling so sad and so homesick, except I was at home.
Wow.
It took me years until I started to make a connection about what that was about. But so this all continued through my teenage years. I keep fighting, I keep training, continue my, solitary, private sort of, at least, I can have some sort of relief, but it was always 2 different worlds.
Right.
And I would, I met a couple of girls, women, and just completely fell head over heels. And I was such a nice guy that I just had no idea how to be a man. I had no idea how to create a world and then invite her into it. I had no idea the power and the necessity of creating mystery and intrigue and danger and excitement. Like, I didn't know that. I had that in my life because I was teaching, but I had these deep insecurities because I wouldn't even say that morality was eroded, because I never felt guilty or shame because I had this upbringing of like your body is a wonderful thing. And there's all this, so there wasn't any, religious stuff or anything. It was a miss. And so I never dated.
Oh, wow.
I was never in a relationship. Meanwhile, I'm teaching, I'm training, I'm fighting. I started competing in these amazing, gritty, like bar fights. It was right after UFC came out, like 93. And I was the only guy that knew jujitsu because I started training jujitsu. One of my mentors had turned me on to it a year before the UFC. So I was very fortunate to be ahead of the curve on that. So when they started having these fights in this club that I bounced at, no rules, no time limit, no weight limit, no safety equipment, literally just like get in there and go. And I knew that I had to do that or I have to stop teaching because I was teaching Taekwondo, very, family friendly. It was intense, but it wasn't real.
Why that,
real fighting.
or you had to stop teaching?
Because I started teaching when I was 15, started training jujitsu after a very intense baptism in reality where I was 19, met this girl, was into her. It's like, oh, is this what this is like? This is awesome. We went to a party and I'm like, for the first time in my life, like I'm with a girl. This is amazing. And we're having fun. And there's a guy at the party who's like mad dogging me. And I can't understand why. I've never seen this guy in my life. Meanwhile, I'm kind of like have feelings for this girl. This is cool. So I asked her, I'm like, what's that guy's deal? She looks at me, she twirls her hair and she goes, oh, he's kind of my boyfriend. Oh, great. Now I've got all this like already, like I don't feel good enough. Yeah. Here's this girl that I like. And now it turns out she's got this dude. And like, I have no frame of reference for this. This is not in any book that I've ever read. I don't know what this is. And I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling hurt. And I'm just like, it's too much. Like I'm out. So I told her, well, I'm going to leave. So I go to leave the party. And as I'm walking down the driveway, this dude tackles me.
Whoa.
Jumps on me. Jumps on my back. We hit the pavement in this driveway. And I'd been competing and training Taekwondo, Olympic Taekwondo, like full contact. Yeah. I'd done hundreds of matches, but I'd never been in a fight.
Yeah.
And the first thought that hit my brain after the pavement hit my head.
After your pavement hit the head, you had a thought.
It was exactly like that. Those two things, a pavement hit my head and a thought pops into my mind. This guy's going to get disqualified for that. Because I literally thought you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. You had trained Taekwondo. I was like, no, he can't do that.
You can't do that.
Right.
You're not allowed.
Right.
And then I realized, oh shit, I'm on the ground. This dude's raining punches down onto me and there is no referee. Like, I don't know what to do. And so I'm a second-degree black belt. I've trained for thousands of hours and I've been in hundreds of matches and I've won a lot of them. And now I don't know what to do. And I'm just like, it's just like, there's nothing that prepares you for that. Luckily, some people pulled us apart and now I'm like standing up across from this dude and he's like, I'm going to kill you, motherfucker. And he's just like drunk and I'm just like, okay, morally, I'm like, he started it, right? If I kick him, I'm not in the wrong. Okay. And I just counted down 1, 2, 3. And I just roundhouse kicked him in the head. The guy just dropped like a rock. I jumped over him, scared as hell, get in my car, look back and the guy's standing up. He's fine. But I left. That night rocked my reality.
Yeah.
Because I'd been told that I'm a badass, oh, good fight, good fight, good fight. Well, you hear that a few hundred times. By the time you're 19, good fight. You think you're a good fighter. Mm-hmm. Then I got an actual fight. It wasn't even that bad, but it was like destroyed my model of
fighting
capacity. Yeah. Like, can I fight? So,
which was, I would imagine, tied with your self-worth at this point in time to some degree.
Big time. Because it's like, well, am I a fake? Am I a fraud?
Right.
I'm a second-degree black belt.
That was I am a fighter. That's the label.
That was my identity.
On, right?
Like I'm a fighter. And that was my number one form of relevance and value in the world and significance and confidence. And I'm just barely figuring out this relationship thing. But now there's just like, well, shit, is it all fake? Like, am I a fraud? Like, what's the deal? And again, like perfect storm of events. I had a mentor of mine who lived here in Austin, who his martial arts school was doing very well. So he would go and train in Torrance in LA with the Gracies. So he found out about jiu-jitsu before anybody else in our circles knew about it, started training me. And I realized this was why I didn't know what to do, because I didn't know how to fight on the ground. We didn't even know there was such a thing as ground fighting.
Right.
And then a year later, I'd competed in some grappling tournaments, did pretty good. Then I'm a bouncer at this club and they start having these fights. So I'm training jiu-jitsu just personally, teaching taekwondo, competing in taekwondo, had a vision of opening my school. And now this club, Sneakers Nightclub, San Antonio, Texas, it's like where bands went to be born and bands went to die. So it's like, in 1 week, I remember we had Foghat come through, like slow ride, take it easy.
Yeah.
And the same week we had this very weird sounding up and coming band. There's something about them though. It's fucking Soundgarden.
No way.
So like Yngwie Malmsteen would come through and play 90s guitar. And the next week we'd have Stone Temple Pilots come through who were just getting started.
And where was this at?
San Antonio.
It was in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the club started to have these fight nights because they see this UFC craze and they're like, why not? And I knew the manager and he knew I was really connected to martial arts. And a lot of my friends were training jiu-jitsu and this idea started. They called it virtual combat. And it's literally no rules, no time limit, no weight limit, no safety equipment. So dudes just signed up to fight. And that's where the moral dilemma came in, because here I am for the last, since I was 15, I thought I'm teaching people how to defend themselves. Right. But then the year earlier, I'd realized it's not what I thought it was. Right. All these beautiful sounding theories. And, there's all this, I truly, truly, truly believe in the value of martial arts. The difference though is that less so now, but back then nobody knew what reality-based fighting was.
Right. Do you think it was that many of the Taekwondo purists, or just say martial arts purists for the various art forms that they are, looked at something like that, which then evolved really into UFC, and they're like, no, that's wrong because it is not maintaining its purity in its art form.
Yes, very much so. That's really well said, Alec. And because you have this heavy confirmation bias, and because a lot of people, this is their livelihood, and there's no consumer litmus test for quality. And so, you walk into a martial arts school, you don't know anything. Here's this guy who's a black belt and there's some dusty trophies on the wall, and like, you just don't know. Right. And so there's no way of testing the effectiveness of what you're about to learn. Even if they've gone to tournaments, that just sometimes makes it worse. And so, I knew that either I have to find out if I can actually handle myself in a no rule situation, or I can't keep teaching and telling people that what I'm going to teach you is going to save you in a fight. Right. I might still teach for fun and fitness and life skills, great for kids, and it's good for confidence in general. But to tell people this technique, this reverse side kick, this rising block that's going to help you in a real fight, if I don't actually know, and it's not like I'm going to use any of that stuff in these fights, because I've already felt from jiu-jitsu what works and what doesn't work. Right. And I already watched the first UFC. I'm like, this is not how people think, a fight is not what people think it is. So I signed up to fight, and long story shorter, I that year fought 11 times. I won 9 of them and I lost 2. And it fundamentally changed my life. Really? Because I got to see how much theory was out there that actually falls apart in the real world. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these guys that came in to fight, they were style purists. So one guy was like, practice Kung Fu. Another guy was like a ninjutsu practitioner. Another guy's just a brawler, a street fighter. Another guy's a kickboxer. And they only knew their styles. Mm. And they'd come into the ring with years of theory and very isolated practice, where there's a very finite set of there's a very limited feedback that they're getting. Mm-hmm. No rules means no rules. And so when, a guy who was like a wrestler, but he'd never been sidekicked before, his fight was over. Another guy who is a amazing kickboxer, but he gets put on the ground, and now, you're mounted on him, and he doesn't know how to get out, and his punches are ineffective because you're tying him up. You learn very quickly what's theory that doesn't work and what is theory that does work. And along with this, I'm in my own existential crisis of loneliness and isolation and feeling socially awkward. So of course, then I'm grappling with meaning and purpose. And then I'm like, Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, wait a minute. These guys seem like they're on way different ends of the spectrum. And yet they both seem convinced that they know the truth.
Right.
And here's all my Taekwondo instructors, great people, but they were convinced that they knew the truth.
Yeah.
And so I really started to question, what is truth? And I decided, I wasn't able to verbalize it for a couple of years, but I decided to stop caring what's true and to stop searching for the truth and instead ask what's useful.
Wow.
And if it's useful, I'll use it until it doesn't work. And then I'll use something else, which all came all the way back to responsibility. I have to know what I want, because if I don't know what I want, then what's the point of learning anything? And what's the point of learning anything if there isn't a usefulness for what I'm learning? And I didn't know it then, but that was forming a basis for the work that I do now. So I went through all that period. The 2 fights that I lost were some of the best experience that I ever could have had because of what I was able to get out of them. Went on to open my first school when I was 23 years old. Still continued to rise in my professional life and my skills and teaching. Still deeply lonely on a personal level, angry at the universe, angry at God. How can it be possible that I can know so much? Like, honestly, it's very egoic. Like, I'm so cool. When is somebody going to notice how cool I am? And so I just kept trying to be cooler and more valuable and funnier and smarter and all these things. Meanwhile, I just couldn't, like, my heart wasn't open. I just couldn't connect socially. Even when I'd go to connect somewhere, I immediately reverted to the professional Jesse, Mr. Elder. And so people would introduce me to their friends, and I'm enrolling them in kickboxing. And it was just like, it was a very weird time. I ended up 27 years old, never had a girlfriend, never in any serious relationship or any relationship really. I went on some dates, but it was like and then I met a woman. She had 3 kids already. She was 5 years older, completely fell in love. Next thing you know, we're married. And so my first relationship was a marriage of 10 years.
Wow.
And so it was like from nothing to all of it.
Yeah.
And along the way, I just have this sort of overarching, like observer sort of experience that I'm going to live a long life. So I'm not in a hurry to try and accomplish something by a certain date, or I'm completely disinterested in other external metrics of where I should be by any certain time in my life. And when that marriage ended, 10 years after we got married, it ended because there was parts of me that I was unable to reconcile with this almost default life that I'd signed up for. And our relationship worked very well. And there were things within it that were just, in hindsight, probably very fundamental elements of conflict, but we didn't have the tools to resolve the conflict. And I was becoming, interested in mushrooms. And I was like, I'm pretty sure these are not bad. And she was like, no, that's terrible. Like, those things are awful. And I'm like, but how do you know?
Right.
Well, I did mushrooms one time when I was in college. I'm like, was there drinking involved? Was it like,
what was the context?
Was it like a
what
party?
Was the intention?
She was like, yeah. I'm like, well, this is different. So that's just one example, but we just had very different worldviews and very different relationships towards structure, towards authority. And eventually it reached the point where we were trying too hard to make it work, and it became obvious that it wasn't the right thing. So I ended up selling my business, 6 months later, had the mental clarity to realize the relationship was over. So I got divorced. The nice guy really came out because I really felt bad for the disintegration of the marriage. Even though I knew I was doing what I needed to do, I could still see how much pain she was in. And so essentially I agreed to a deal with her that functionally meant that the sale of the business went to pay for the divorce. So I found myself 39 years old, starting over again.
Wow.
In just about every way you could, socially, financially, certainly on a spiritual, emotional level. And all those lessons and all those insights from growing up, from the fighting days, from running my schools, all of it came back. And I realized in 2013 that this is a chance to test all of these theories that I've been appreciating for a while, but now they're all I have. So I need to find out what's possible. I need to find out what is the role of thought and emotion and imagination in truly creating a life that is authentic and unique and powerful and contributive. And it was a scary year because I didn't know how I was going to do things. I didn't know I was going to make money. I didn't know how I was going to do anything. And I just began to aggressively test all sorts of different things, journaling and meditation. And I just started saying yes to different opportunities. And I realized that I'm going to be involved in coaching somehow, but I saw some of the coaching industry and it made me want to vomit. I was like, what have you done in your life? Like, why are you telling other people how to run their life when you haven't done shit? And I was very judgmental, which wasn't inappropriate because I came from this background of talk is cheap, you know, prove yourself. What have you done? And I just mentally made a decision that if there's a ladder to this industry, I'm not interested in climbing the ladder. I'm not even interested on being on any ladder, but if there is a ladder, if there's a hierarchy, if people are going to perceive you to have certain status, I'm just going in at the very top. And so everywhere I went, I just assumed that I've already arrived. And I still had a lot of insecurity because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I'm going to help people, which led to that insecurity created a lot of curiosity, which was a defense mechanism because I would ask people questions so they wouldn't ask me anything. And it turns out that being genuinely curious, genuinely interested, creating space for people to feel without being judged, they start talking about their dreams. They start talking about what they really want, what they're really struggling with. And then ideas started to come in about, well, have you considered this? Have you tried this? And I started to see, it was like X-ray vision. I could see the deficiency that somebody was unaware of because I'd worked with thousands of people and I taught 40,000 martial arts classes and I'd worked with thousands of kids and I'd seen these kids grow up in martial arts. And you just see patterns and you start to notice that, well, how's your relationship with your mom? Or how's your hydration levels? Or are you meditating? Or how often do you take time to regularly visualize your future with like positive emotion? Or when's the last time you just said, fuck it, and just like rolled the dice and just went to some country just because you've never been? And I didn't know where these answers are coming from other than my own lived experience and ways that resolved pain for me. And next thing you know, I become like the guy to talk to if your company's growing super fast and you want to eliminate the wobble, or if you've tried everything else and nothing seems to work, go call Jesse. And I became like Forrest Gump. I was just like the right place, the right time. And yeah, I'm still doing it to this day.
It's so funny because someone just called me Forrest Gump today, but that's for another reason. It's related to sports. But man, wow, what a journey. What a incredible journey. There's a few things you said. I mean, there's several things you said that I want to like pull on threads there. One of which relates to you growing up with this amount of freedom and responsibility, because the world says that, you know, this is very generally speaking, that kids need a lot of structure and order and direction and really an authority figure telling them that what they do and do not need. And my question is centered around because your parents had the wherewithal to understand just by looking at you when you were born, like, this kid is very special. We're going to give him this freedom to explore and become, whatever he wants to be. Is it that you are unique in that sense, or is it that kids, when sort of given the freedom and responsibility, are able to find an authentic expression that leads to a fulfilling life? I don't know if I articulated that as best as I could, but
no, dude, it is a brilliant question on many levels, and it would be irresponsible and unethical if I were to say this is how it is,
right?
Like for kids or people in general. I've definitely gone through phases of believing that, but I think some people are here to lead. I think some people are here to follow. Some people are here to build. Some people are here to nurture. Some people are here to fuck things up.
Right.
Like they're just here. They're agents of chaos.
Right.
And like that is their dharma. They are here to break things. And from a more elevated or zoomed out perspective over a long enough time period, it truly is all good. Like we're all partners here. And so that being said, the innate, the basis of human nature, and this I know for sure, the basis of human nature is freedom seeking.
Mm-hmm.
The basis of like the function of a human being is to create. We have this thing called imagination that nothing else has that we're aware of. And if that's not godlike, I don't know what is.
Mm.
And so for the child that is loved, kept physically safe, but also nurtured emotionally by having as many new experiences as possible, especially the younger that they are, the safety, the caretaker's job is to create physical safety so that the life force, the being, is not ever in real danger. But a child must experience danger.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't experience danger, they cannot know who they really are. Boy or girl, doesn't matter. Boys a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's why you look in like ancient cultures, well, not even ancient cultures, like cultures in the very recent past, they would have men or children as they're becoming men do these initiatory experiences where they had to go off by themselves.
Yeah, every indigenous culture in the world has rites of passage. Mm. Modern culture does not. And so for a child to be given opportunities to explore their desires, explore their curiosities, explore their interests, but not be enabled in the receiving of those things so that they can experience their own hero's journey. Mm. That is essential. And then they get to discover who they really are. Mm. Now, this is outside of the traditional system of command and control hierarchies, whether it's economic, spiritual, religious, relational. There are it's the alpha beta hierarchy. You know that the alpha, the strong ones, are the ones who command resources, including people, and then the betas are the ones who kind of do what they're told and take what's left over. And the truth is, both of those hierarchies, nothing wrong with either one of them, they both need each other. There's another hierarchy or another it's a social phenomenon. There's really no science to back this up. But the social phenomenon of the sigma, and the sigma is neither desiring control like an alpha, nor are they willing to be controlled like a beta, but they're very self-directed, self-oriented, and that's a whole other frame. But every child has an internal guidance system. Yeah. Every human being has an internal guidance system, and those are our feelings. And so when you're allowed, not taught, but just allowed to have your feelings honored, that it's not bad, it's not good. Most parents are uncomfortable if their children are unhappy around other people. Most parents are uncomfortable if their children are unhappy, period. But to the degree that, and this is, I do believe for all humans, to the degree that we can allow someone else to just have their own experience, we experience freedom. And then the byproduct of us experiencing freedom is that someone else experiences freedom. And then your emotions are not wrong. Your emotions are not bad. You can be happy, you can be sad, you can be angry, you can be afraid, and that's all good. Yeah. Like you can experience whatever you need to experience. It's when people get into enmeshed barter systems where happy wife, happy life, as long as the kids are happy, I'm happy. Oh, what if they're not? Does that mean you're not happy?
Right.
I'm not saying that you're not feeling pain because someone you love is in pain.
Yeah, it's not lack of empathy. It's,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so your question, like, do children have this innate ability to discover what they want, follow their passion? 100% yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's the externally imposed timelines that screw things up. Like you're supposed to have this figured out by this time. Totally. Well, what if you don't?
Right.
So what if you don't?
It's a really interesting point that relates so much. So our son goes to Acton Academy, which if I'm going to endorse a quote school system, it would be that one, because it's all based on self-directed learning, which is why we love it so much. And he's with other kids that are his age, which, one could argue you don't necessarily need that, but we do like it.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And previous to that, when he was at home, good friend of mine, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, she had started self-directed learning with her kids. And that's like, as you know, extreme homeschooling. It's how you were raised. Yeah. And her kids were thriving. Her son, Kabreem, is now, just because he feels called to it, doing what would be considered like 10th or 11th grade level math. And he's like 8. And it's just because he truly internally feels desire to do math, but he was quote behind in reading. And she's like, all this doesn't, like, who makes these standards?
Who makes these standards?
Right. And so we started doing the same approach with our son, and he's 6.5 now. And he is reading at, again, there's not levels, but is reading at what would be considered like a 9 or 10-year-old level. And it's because he feels called to read. And we have no external, pressure for him where we're like, oh, you should be doing this level of math, this level of this. It's like, no, kids, in my opinion, and again, this, I can't say that it applies across the spectrum, right? But already have that innate connection to God and to their own feelings and intuition that just needs to be cultivated in order for them to discover what they truly want to create in this realm.
Yep.
And
Dude,
it was
so well said.
Well, and then this is what also sort of layers my perspective is that Kabreem, Dr. Edith's son, he can read blindfolded. And then I have met and literally seen with my own 2 eyes, 2 other kids when I was at Anarchapulco in Mexico. I'm not going to say because they want to keep it private, but a friend of mine, their 2 sons can also read blindfolded. And
we're not talking about Braille.
No, I'm talking about being able to read things that are on paper with their eyes completely covered. And it's really incredible to see in person. It's incredible. But what's most incredible is that both Kabreem and these 2 other kids, it's so innate for them now that they don't feel that it's special. And it's like, all kids can do this. Yeah. And for the 2 kids that I saw in Mexico, one of them, as they were reading blindfolded, was, I won't say struggling a little bit, but kind of struggling a little bit on one part. And his mom was like, it's because you haven't been practicing lately. But what was so interesting is like, this is so innate to him that it's not special. Right. Like this is how kids are. So he's like, I don't really feel like practicing anymore because this is, of course I can do this. All kids can do this. Yeah. And I think that is the potential of human beings when given the authentic and the real freedom and responsibility impressed upon them, and not trying to be put in this box with all this authority, putting like just spewing propaganda and indoctrination and all the things that come with the public school system. This is the future for kids.
Yes. 100%, dude. 100%. And it's the removal of, excuse me, the removal of the externally imposed, artificially created standards that is terrifying for most parents. Because if they came up under that, then they literally don't know what it's like to live a completely self-authorized life. And when I would hear parents who would tell me, and to this day, people will say, well, I went to public school and I turned out okay. I'm like, did you? Like, are you living your passion? Do you know your purpose? Do you know what your body really is? Or do you think your body's like a dumb machine that somehow learned to think and is prone to entropy and breaking down? You still believe in viruses? What? Like, did you turn out okay?
Right.
Because there's nothing wrong with you. But from where I'm standing, you're in second fucking gear compared to who you really can be.
Totally. And how many of us, like, I'll say that I went to West Point, went to the world's, I say this pretty frequently. Yeah. World's like largest government indoctrination camp. Right.
Yeah.
And I will fully acknowledge that in order to get to this point there and continue on this journey, there's a lot of undoing that I look at kids who are raised in environments that allows them this freedom and responsibility and doesn't have the authority-based dogma and indoctrination from the system. They don't have to go through as much of the undoing first. They're just starting with a, for lack of a better term, clean slate to build upon, where a lot of us, it's like, okay, I have to undo all of these layers and build at the same time, which then makes me see it in the wrong way, which has me undoing all these layers again to then build from a solid foundation.
Yeah. And for somebody who's in that process, who's aware of that process, there's a temptation to go, oh, I wish I would have had it this way, or to overcompensate by saying, I'm going to make sure my kids never had to do. And it's like, well, this is all about you, first of all. Like, this is your journey. Your kids are on their own journey. And by saying, I got to have the experience of going to school, getting abused, I got molested over here, I had this drug addict friend. Okay, great. That's just what happened. So what? Like, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
And those are just interesting evolutionary experiences. That's just like spice in your recipe. Those are literally meaningless events that you get to create meaning out of. Right. And that's what's become a huge part of the work that I do now, is this process of empowered meaning creation. So how do you go back to those events and extract the gold while dry cleaning the suffering right out of it, to the point where when you think about it, you smile and you laugh and you're like, oh man, that was a gnarly one. And it's like, brings you joy that you got to have such an epic experience. And it's not bypassing. It is legit, like the body's listening. And the thing about it, and we'll get into time piercing in a second, because this is the total link to this. When somebody has a painful experience, which, welcome to Earth, it's going to happen. The pain that is unprocessed and then attaches a meaning to it, attaches a story to it, whether they share the story or just tell themselves the story of what happened. And you don't even usually find people who consciously say, this is what I made it mean. Like, that's super rare. It's like, no, this happened and it was bad, and this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. It's like, okay, well, there's the experience followed by the spells, and then the story, and then the story becomes an event. So that the next time they think about that painful, bad experience, and they tell themselves a story, it becomes another event. And then another week goes by and they think about it and it becomes another event. And then a year goes by and they've thought about it 365 times and had 365 events. And now it's 30 years later and they're like, oh, I've been struggling with this thing for 30 years. I'm like, well, actually you've been practicing this thing for 30 years and your body's been listening and going, oh, stress. Okay. More adrenaline. Okay. What? More cortisol here. And so your body's listening. Your body's a perfect mirror of your beliefs. And as you change the story about the event, you literally change the event. Mm-hmm. And then the biochemical reaction to that event changes. So your cells are listening. Every cell is born perfect, knows exactly what to do, but that quickly takes on the energetic qualities of the body of cells that it's a part of. And this is why people get old. Bottom line. I mean, That's why people get stuck in these suffering loops. And so, I'm definitely not the person, if somebody's looking for a support group. Like, I just model nature, man. There's, like Crow says, there's no lies in nature. And so I can't imagine a group of gazelles It's like the lion attack survivor support group. And all the gazelles are hanging out, and there's a new gazelle. He's kind of gimpy, and there's like, everybody, we'd like to welcome Bobby. Hi, Bobby. Bobby, tell us your story. Well, I was at the watering hole, and it was a regular Thursday, and then a lion came after me, and then I started to run, but he got my leg, and everybody's like, oh, it's okay, Bobby. We've all been there, Bobby. Tell us more about the lion attack. No, fucking gazelles don't do that.
Right.
We've seen what they do.
It's the moment, and then the moment is gone.
And what do they do after they get attacked? Every wild prey creature, gazelle, zebras, wildebeest, whatever, they survive an attack, and as soon as they're safe, they shake violently for like a minute.
Right.
And that's it. And then they go on about their wildebeest lives.
They're engaged in deep somatic work right away.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I had a dude, this is a great evolutionary experience. I moved into a really nice house in 2022. Beautiful neighborhood. I won't say where, but as we mentioned it earlier in our conversation before the podcast, beautiful neighborhood. I come home one day from working with a client, and I never lock my doors. It's like, whatever. My spider sense is tingling as I'm opening the door. There's a dude standing in my hallway, burgling my house, points a pistol at my face. He says, "Don't make me shoot you." And I'm like, fair enough. I won't. The distance is far enough that there was no instinct kicked in, like I need to disarm this guy or whatever. So I just ducked tail and ran. And I ran, and by the time I got back to the house, the guy was gone. I didn't feel any fear during that. I didn't detect ill intent. I didn't feel afraid. The dude has just picked my house to knock over. But I knew that this has got the seeds of some potent trauma if I want it to be that.
Right.
So I'm going to apply all this EMC, empowered meaning creation is what we call it. And as soon as I was like chill and knew that I was safe, I stood up and I shook like a fucking zebra for like 3 minutes. And I was like, just let it out, let it out, let it out, let it out, let it out. And then I sat down to write. First question I wrote was, why am I glad this happened?
Wow.
And then all these answers came out in response to that prompt. And by the time I finished, I'm feeling literal gratitude for this dude. Like, thank you for being my partner. Thank you for showing up in this divinely appointed meeting so that we could both learn what we needed to learn. It was epic.
If you're enjoying this episode, please consider sharing it with at least one friend or family member who you think could benefit from hearing it. You help us grow and reach more people by sharing it with those around you. Also, be sure to head to the show notes to check out our membership offerings, membership marketplace, and more. We all know that Big Ag is poisoning our food supply, and Big Pharma's so-called medicine is straight up poison. What most people aren't aware of, though, is that most supplements are also filled with artificial sweeteners, dyes, GMOs, glyphosate, and a host of other toxic ingredients, even many of the more natural supplements. My good buddy James Benefico dedicated his life to crafting the world's cleanest, most nutritious organic supplements after a pre-workout energy drink caused heart palpitations so severe that he almost landed up in the ER. Organic Muscle was born, revolutionizing sports nutrition by using exclusively non-GMO ingredients from USDA organic farms. Since then, tens of thousands of people, including myself, have leveled up their fitness and their health with Organic Muscle's award-winning natural pre-workout. There's no jitters, no heart palpitations, no itchy skin, just nourishing organic food and herb-based ingredients for clean, sustained energy, strength, endurance, and recovery. Numerous studies have shown that Tonka Ali is the most effective herb in the world for naturally boosting testosterone levels. And we know that testosterone levels are depleting all over the world because of what's put in the food supply, what we're exposed to. Organic Muscle has the world's first fully organic Tonka Ali supplement. I only support and promote things that I actually use, and I can say I legitimately use Organic Muscle products. Use code FORWARD15 at checkout for 15% off at organicmuscle.com. So I've done a lot of childhood trauma healing work, and I won't say that all of it was ineffective, right? Like there's some things I've done, like emotional freedom technique that deals with various energy points in the body of releasing stored traumas. And I know that they do get stored in what I would consider our subconscious mind, which is synonymous with the body. So like that gets stored in the body. But in general, I think so many people in this space overcomplicate healing trauma. And you said a couple of things there that resonate with me so deeply as it relates to just trauma in general. And you talked about things that are unprocessed, and what you did there in the moment of shaking and somatically releasing and then writing out that question afterwards is that was processing. And when it comes to things in our past that we perceive as traumatic, it's because we are perpetually not processing it. And all that it requires to process something is just to feel it.
Yeah.
Just to feel it. Like feel it fully. And when I say feel it, people who are suffering with chronic depression or chronic anxiety, it's because they haven't allowed themselves to fully feel that initial experience. And just like you said, they've been creating experience after experience after experience without fully going into something. And once you fully go into something and just feel it one time, actually process it, right? Like somatically and then also psychosomatically, if you will, you can then write a new story about it. And it's not a forced thing. You can't like force your way into being positive, right? But it's an authentic going into something, processing it, like deeply going into it, and then writing your own story about it.
Yes, literally writing it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, like words are so cool, man. Some of them are, like it's right there. So like, the word authorize, it's like you authorize something, like you're the authority, you're the creator, but the word authorize, like you're seeing something through the eyes of an author, like you're creating it. And so many experiences that people have had that were legitimately awful, legitimately painful. You can say, well, that thing happened and that means that I'm a worthless piece of shit and that this and that, or my dad never loved me or whatever. And cool. Like that's not untrue. There's certainly accuracy in that. There's plenty of evidence to back that up. And is that all that happened? Or is there more to the story? And one of the things that I take people through in these guided journeys because words don't have any power by themselves, but words are magnets for attention, and a skilled architect of attention can put the right words together in a sequence or a series that brings people into different states of awareness so that they can be in this fully felt, fully present, not disassociated, but so safe within their being and so safe within the love and the light that's always available that they can literally go over in time to the other now where that thing is happening, and they can see it from a different perspective, and they'll see things that they couldn't see when they were in the moment having the experience. I teach people to go right before the event as their current self and sidle up next to the version of them that's about to go into it and say, all right, let me tell you, you're about to go into something that's going to seem really intense. It is going to be intense, but here's what it's going to mean. And here's what it's going to be for. And I've seen legitimate miracles happen for people who go through this.
It's also because for you, that's not a mental exercise it is an exercise of imagination, you could say. But what I mean by that is you're not, how do I put this? Words, I struggle to find words for this. You're not imagining something for the sake of imagining it. You are actually, in terms of what you've come to perceive, literally going back to that point.
Yep.
And connecting with that version of you.
Right.
And that's what you call time piercing. Right.
And this is a perfect entry point to this very interesting technology. There are some people who would say, well, whether it's time piercing or creative visualization or whatever, they would say, oh, well, that's just thought. Okay, well, is there any evidence that everything isn't thought? Right. So if you say it's just thought, it means you don't understand thought.
Right.
Which is totally cool. But when I'll preface everything I'm about to get into with one, maybe not a disclaimer, but I'm the most skeptical person because I had the background with fighting. And I literally, when I opened my first school, I literally had dudes come into my school and challenge me. And they were like, there's already a school in this area and it's not big enough for both of us. It was like Wild West, like 70s Kung Fu battling. And I would be like, what? No, it's like, this is a free market economy, bro.
It's like a mob in the fighting world.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is our territory,
yeah,
bro.
It literally was like that. And so I had a dude come in and he was like really upset that I opened a school because it was, his area and all of this. And I'm like already understanding entrepreneurship. And I'm like, dude, there's like 1% of the population at any given time that's actively training. There's 1.2 million people in San Antonio. If we took every school that's already open, mine, yours, and all the other ones, and we quintupled their enrollment, we still wouldn't be at 1%.
Right.
So it's like there's far more market. There's far more demand than there is supply. But you're not going to get that through across to a guy whose his ego's puffed up. So I just took the next thing that I knew, which was, well, let's duke it out. Because if you can beat me, then I will say, yeah, you're the better person and I shouldn't be contaminating this marketplace.
So you fought the guy of the other.
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
100%. There was one dude in particular, I remember he was a Kempo instructor. He's like miles and miles away, but he was very offended that I opened. And I said, well, let's do this. Let's spar, but no rules. Like, let's make this real. And if I beat you, then you just chill out. And if you beat me, then I'll become your student. And then you can have this school and I'll work under you. But other than that, and he was like, are you serious? I'm like, I'm dead fucking serious, man. Let's go. And he's like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. Then be quiet. It's like, we can be cool. So that's the background that I came from. Right. And it's something I still feel very active today. I would love to see like a UFC equivalent for spiritual teachers and coaches. Like, that would be epic.
Yeah.
Like,
wonder how you would run that. That'd be interesting. Like maybe effectiveness.
It'd be very, very easy. You just give them a batch of random people and then they only work with those people for 90 days. And you do a baseline measurement across every possible metric that you can think of, tangible and intangible, some self-reported, some objectively measured. Yeah. And then you work with them for 90 days. And at the end of 90 days, let's see whose group is measurably improved. Like, simple. So,
okay. So you've thought about this.
Vividly.
Because I was like, how would you? You're like, oh, I already know. I got
Vividly. But then I backed off from the idea because I'm like, well, everybody gets what they need when they need it. And that's fine. But I preface that just because what I'm about to share, I've already seen and I already know that 100 years from now, this is going to be so commonplace that it will be like the kids blindfolded going, duh. Right now, science hasn't caught up to the point where it can be measured empirically enough to satisfy those who need evidence in order to believe something. So to that, I'll say none of what I'm claiming, either now or ever, will I claim as the truth. These are simply things that I found useful after a lifetime of aggressively split testing entire paradigms. And I'm not attached to the truth. The moment I find something that works better than this, or the moment I find out that what I'm teaching is bullshit, I'll be the first one to say, wow, I was going through a phase. Here's what I found now. That being said, this time piercing thing, man, it is continually beating every other method of personal development that I've found, whether it's mine or anything else that I've heard from clients and students. And the reason is because the one thing that everyone has that is unique to them is their future. And the future is so unwritten and so malleable and so able to be informed by intrinsic wisdom that the way that someone gets to create their future is so unique to them. If their mind can be freed from programming, if their mind can be freed from the regurgitated pain of past trauma, and they can enter into that relationship with superintelligence, God, source, whatever somebody's word is for that, then they will enter a realm of rapidly conscious creating. There are dimensions outside of this one that are created purely with thought. This dimension moves slower because we're learning how to think. But there are other dimensions where you create with thought. You don't need machines to make machines. You just have a relationship with matter and energy. We're not there yet. Most people are not there. So the way that I'll usually ease into this or break it down is that most people know that matter and energy are the same thing, right? They're a wave and a particle. And you can observe this very easily if you look at a solid, like an ice cube, solid, because it's vibrating at a certain speed. If the vibration increases, the molecules start moving faster and it becomes liquid, it becomes water. It's the exact same mass, same molecules, just a different vibrational state. If the molecules are agitated or vibrate faster, then the water, the liquid, becomes vapor, becomes gas. And it now occupies a much greater area. Even though it's the same amount of mass, it's less dense, spreads out, the vibration's higher. So we can understand that in terms of physical things. One of the exercises we do in these workshops, in these experiences, is to have people write down a list of non-physical, but very real, very measurable things. And it usually takes a little bit of prompting, but next thing you know, people are like, oh, well, duh, sound. Like you can't weigh it, you can't see it, but you can measure it, but only if you have something to measure it with, which sounds like a redundant statement. But the old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is no, 100% no, because sound is vibration that's been intercepted by a receiving mechanism and converts into this thing called sound. Otherwise, it's just a wave. So if you keep going up this vibrational scale from sound, let's say, to light, which is visible and observable. But then what if you just keep going up the scale? Is there a limit to the scale? Is there like a universal governor of like, nope, that's as high as you get to vibrate? I don't think so. So then you keep going up the scale. Well, then you have things like, gamma rays and X-rays, and you've got, faint radiation. But if you keep going up the scale, well, then what's to say that thought itself isn't on that scale? And our brains, which we know so little about, are amazing enough that our brains can actually detect these waves. Well, just as a sound wave isn't limited by space. So we could be here in your studio and, you could be playing a guitar and that sound would immediately go through the entire building. Even though the originator of the sound is here, but the wave goes out everywhere. Right. Let's say I'm in the other room and there's a piano and I can hear the song you're playing because the signal transcends the distance. And now I'm sitting at the piano and I start playing piano along with the music that you're playing. And now that music transcends space and enters into this room. So the sound waves permeate the entire building, even though they're coming from different places. So my theory is that thought operates outside of time and space, which time and space are really the same thing. Time is what happens when you move through space. And so when you're in this moment and your consciousness that is the part of your consciousness that is inhabiting this physical apparatus is firmly within time. And yet we have this mind that can perceive something that isn't happening here and now, and yet very clearly happened. We call that the past. We can also perceive something that hasn't happened or might never happen, which we call the future. But we can only experience those three elements of time, past, present, and future, in one moment, which is now. And all the traditions say this, like there is only one moment, there is only now. Where we're going with this perspective is, let's call it your soul or your higher self, the oversoul, whatever tradition somebody's got. We know that we're more than these things. And science knows nothing about it. Like the only thing scientists can really agree on about life is that the dead ones don't have it and the ones that are alive do. Like that's it.
This thing animating this, we don't know, but
yes. So then when we die, is that the end of that thing? Or does that mean that the bulb goes dark? Yeah. The energy's still there. Yeah. The bulb is still the exact same bulb. It's just not illuminated anymore. So that's why I just can't take death seriously. I don't believe in it at all.
Me either.
So then the animating factor, which seems to have its own ability to perceive itself, and we do that through words and our individual consciousness in this body, but they can't be all we are. So then there's this larger consciousness. Well, does that mean that this body and this brain and these names and these hands and this is this the only game in town for that larger consciousness? And it goes into this one for a few decades, and then it goes out, and then it goes into this one for a few decades. That makes no sense to me. Like, it seems retarded. Like, I don't see how this infinite consciousness, which is probably part of like all of infinite consciousness, and yet here's this individuated piece of this consciousness that's still operating outside of time, except in this body, which gets to have time. But imagine if you had one foot was in a bucket of warm water, and you had another foot in a bucket of cold water. And then this hand, you're like rubbing a pillow that's got like fur on it. And in this hand, you're like, you have a handful of Jell-O. Weird examples.
Yeah.
Your foot would be experiencing warmth. Your other foot would be experiencing cold, et cetera, et cetera. And yet you, the being, are having this fantastically multi-sensory experience because you are the singular being having these multi-sensory experiences all in one moment. Is it that much of a stretch then to think that this part of the body could be experiencing 1984? And this part of the body could be experiencing 1681. And this part of the body could be experiencing 2057. Because if this higher being isn't bound by time, then it could move through time with various parts of itself, but each part of itself would be moving through time at the speed of that time. Is this making sense?
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
So if that's the case, and there's no evidence that it's not, then in this particular life, as we're moving through this time, one day at a time, in this artificial chopped up thing called days, we can remember the time when we were a kid riding a bike, looking up at the clouds. And we experience it here as a memory. But that version of us, that now version, is experiencing it fully sensory immersed as now. There's a future version of us. In fact, the future version just fractals out. I mean, these are all based on choices that haven't been made yet. So the future actually branches out from one possible to another possible to another possible.
Right.
So the future branches out like this, even though for most people, the future is going to go like basically whatever the past has been, because most people are unaware of the impact of their daily choices. But they can change. The potentiality is pretty flexible. So let's say there's a point in the future where there's a version of you that is having an experience that is so sensory rich that it really gets logged as a notable point. Like that moment in time in the future, where for your version of the future, it's now, is like, whoa, and just becomes like you become aware that you're aware while you're in that moment. So that becomes a powerful moment for that future, for that now. For you, it's the future. So here's where it gets weird. If thought transcends time and space, then that means every thought that can be thought exists right now. Just like, I don't have my phone here. If I go to play a song in my phone, I don't have any music on my phone other than the music that I've recorded and put on there. But I can listen to any song by typing in on SoundCloud or Spotify, what do I want to listen to? So if I type a song in, it just starts playing. But where's the song before it started playing? It's literally right here. Like every song on Spotify, every track on SoundCloud, every video on YouTube is right, like it's right here. We know that intellectually because we understand this thing called the cloud, where all songs, all websites are on the head of a pin, smaller than that. In fact, you can't get small enough because it's not physical.
Right.
And yet every wave or all those songs, all that data is here. So we use the device to translate that data into vibration of song and video and all these things. So my theory is that our brains, our minds, but very specifically our brains, do the same thing for thought energy. So we can access the thought of the future that our future self is actually living in right now. We can access the thought that is the fully felt experience that our past self is living right now. And we can access the thought that is our physical sense of what we're experiencing. But what I learned how to do, maybe it's definitely a skill. I still new though, so I still feel weird saying like I learned how to do it, but I live my life now this way. I'll do a deep, not tranced out or anything, but just like a really present, just get calm, get quiet. And I'll think about a moment in the past that is particularly delightful. And I'll go and hang out with that kid. And I'll just see through his eyes for a minute. And I'll remember, as another good spell, remember, you're putting it together again. You're putting together the pieces. I'll go back and remember that moment exactly as it happened. If it's a painful moment that could maybe use some processing, then I'll go to before the moment as me, and I'll go and talk to that kid and say, hey, your mom's about to be late picking you up for your third karate class. You're going to be crying because you're going to think it means she forgot about you and all this stuff. But listen, you got 3 brothers that she's also taking care of. You're fine. In fact, this karate thing you're doing, dude. And I'll go back and have a little conversation with that kid. And so that opens up it's like a muscle, like you're building the skill of connecting across time, because it's not even out. It's not across time. That's a physical space for a non-physical reality. But by doing that, it seems to create a sort of magnetic receptivity for a future version of yourself to do the same thing with you. And what I've taught people how to do is to create that magnetic receptivity, which is a vacuum of sorts, where the memory from the future self that comes in has such crystal clarity to it that you are literally remembering the future. You're remembering with the same vivid detail, the same felt sense of emotionality, the same presence as that past memory, which you obviously already lived, so it's easy to remember. It's just as easy to remember forward. Because time's only linear in this third dimension. You go up another density, time doesn't exist. And our minds allow us to experience that. So when I began to test this theory of creativity, intuition, I learned that you can make intuition tactical. You can make what feels like creative visualization. It's not creative. It's responsive. You're calling in, you're asking for the perfect, in this decision tree of weird, random, from our perspective, random synchronicities that led to this unbelievably powerful, beautiful, impactful, benevolent reality that future you is living in. Well, shit, just remember me, bro.
Yeah.
And let me see the world through your eyes for a minute, and let me feel that frequency, and let me be in that space long enough to catch the whiff. Oof, there it is. And you're not making it up. It already exists.
You're just pulling yourself towards it.
And it's not over there. It's over then.
Over then.
It's not elsewhere. It's elsewhen.
Wow.
And then that version of you who is even more wanting to do that for you than you were to do that for the kid that was taking karate or whatever somebody's version was. Because without that kid doing that thing, you wouldn't be where you are today. And without you asking your future self for the exact best next steps to take, knowing that it's going to lead you to the next one, knowing it's going to lead you to that, without you doing that, that dude doesn't exist. So he's beyond motivated to say, hey, I'm glad you called me in, because let me tell you, like, say no to that client.
Yeah.
And just don't say yes to that opportunity. Have a little faith, just chill out for a minute, meditate a little more, go for some walks, go make love, go do whatever you're going to do. Be ready, because something's going to come in. And when it comes in, you'll feel it and you'll know it, because it'll feel like I'm feeling right now.
Incredible. You know, this sounds to me like 100% self-responsibility, because it's not seeking anything outside of you
Right.
for what you would like to create or how you would like to be. It's connecting more deeply with another aspect of you
Yes.
that in this, I don't like calling it an illusion, but for lack of a better term, illusion
That's
of
a very
separation.
useful illusion.
Right. Yeah,
It's a
very
wonderful
useful illusion. It's a wonderful illusion, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because
Yeah.
along several new age thought lines, people want to escape this experience. And
Right.
that's not even,
Right.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
I love this experience.
Right. Same.
And it's connecting more deeply with an aspect of yourself. And you talked earlier about responsibility and how in order to feel full freedom, it requires responsibility. And I just couldn't help but think in a very physical context of like our relationship to government. And I want to pull on that thread later, but
Sure.
because I think that it relates there, like, oh, I don't feel free.
big time.
How much responsibility are you abrogating towards government and authority and other people? And that's why
Exactly.
you don't feel free. But within the context of this, like this sort of metaphysical principle that has real effects in this physical experience,
Yes.
you know, that again is
Yes.
not a accurate way of saying it, but point being that this is requiring a deeper metaphysical
Yes.
responsibility to self
Right.
in order to experience freedom that
Yes.
has real world results.
Yes. Yes. Very well said. And the term metaphysics throws a lot of scientific people off. All I'll say to that is meta, above, beyond, current, understanding. Like 20 years ago, we didn't know what gamma brainwaves were. And now they're like, oh, there's a new brainwave. Well, it's not new. We're just able to see further into what already exists.
Right.
These phones that we have, this podcast, these cameras would all have been metaphysics in the Middle Ages.
Right.
It would have been magic.
Right.
Arthur C. Clarke, any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And so when I talk openly and freely about thought being a frequency that exists and permeates, transcends time, I don't need a scientific measurement to prove that when my entire life is proof. Because the ideas that I get from my future self that come with batteries included, like, oh, let me do this thing. And the absolute, not only lack of resistance, but it's like Pac-Man, waka, waka, boop, there's a power up. Ah, perfect. Like you just, instead of, this is a very old model a lot of people still use, but it's like, I got to struggle my way to the top. It's like, well, what if you didn't? What if you're already at the top? You're born at the top. Everything you want is at the bottom and you're on a snowboard. Like fucking kick off the lip, man, and just go. Like you're partnering with the universe, not fighting it.
Yeah.
And the more you partner with it, the more you enjoy it. Yeah, there's trees, but you don't have a protest like, get rid of the trees. You're just
Right.
like, oh, the tree is where I don't want to go. Thanks, tree. Thanks for giving me some relativity. Thanks for letting me know how fast I'm going. Thanks for giving me a clear non-path so that I can focus on the path.
Right.
Like this is very simple. And the responsibility, and I've had a really interesting conversation with very religious or spiritual folks, even very spiritual folks who are not religious, who still find it most useful. I don't say still, that sounds derogatory. I want to take that back. They find it most useful to believe in a creator who is more powerful than them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find that a useful belief.
Do you feel yourself being inextricably linked to that
There's
creator?
no dis- there's no
there's no
difference.
distinction.
There's no distinction.
Yeah, you're fundamentally an aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I do not see a separation between me and the creator.
Right.
For shorthand, if we call it God, if God is the creator that has set in motion all of this that we perceive and everything else that we can't perceive, which is most of it, then I am not separate from that. And it is not separate from me. Therefore, to call it an it or to call it a he or to call it a they or whatever is inaccurate. Like I don't call my hand it. This is my hand. I am not my hand, but I have a hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm even more intimately connected to God than my hand is to me, because my hand could be separated and no longer be mine, but it wouldn't affect who I am.
Yeah.
I can never be separated from God, and God can never be separated from me. And so the idea, Bernie Siegel, the doctor, had a great quote. He said, God created man in his image, and man returned the favor. And when I have conversation with people who are devoutly, or even not devoutly, but very committed to their pursuit or experience of faith, there generally comes some sort of subservient role that they're playing, where they are subservient to the will of the Creator. I can't get on board with that because the Creator and I are one.
Right. I and my Father are one. And if that is the case, and that is the Creator of this realm, and you are inextricably linked to it, then this is such an interesting point, because even within the context of, or the thought, the school of thought that is, I and my Father are one, and that this realm is one being modulating itself in an infinite number of unique ways. There are those that would say that you need to surrender to its will in order to live a fruitful life. And that's where I'm like, I also don't fully resonate with that. Like I think it's like one can do that. And I'm not saying that you can't live a fruitful life, but when you recognize the reality that you are fundamentally an aspect of the one, and that one is the Creator of this realm, why would you not want to exercise the power of creation that you have within you?
Yeah.
Like, why would you not want to?
Yeah.
And the more that you hold that understanding while deeply connecting with the essence, the true essence of what you are, which is an aspect of God, an aspect of the one, an aspect of, infinite awareness, whatever name you want to attribute to it, the better you are at creating as an aspect of it.
Yes. And within that, there is something that I there's obviously physical and there's non-physical. The non-physical is infused into the physical.
Right. I would even say the physical is just a condensed version of non-physical. But
as I was going to say, is that as above, so below, and within, so without. This omnipotent Creator. If I've thought about this millions of times, if you're the omnipotent Creator and there's nothing that you are not, and you know yourself to be everything, where do you go from there? Like, what's next? There is no next, because you're everything. You'd have to get bored. Like, where do you go? Where do you go? Then I'm imagining this Creator knowing itself as all of creation, transcending space and time, everything that ever has been, will be, everything possible, literally everything. And our human brains suck at computing or computing the infinite. But let's say you're this infinite Creator and you're everything that is, and there's nothing you're not. I got to imagine you would have some sort of epiphany where, like, I'm going to create something where I don't create, but I'm going to create through this thing that's me, but not me. And I got to imagine that thought had to be so delightful that this omnipotent Creator had a massive orgasm called the Big Bang, and just set in motion this duality. And, oh, wow, now I've got a place. Now there's a place. Oh, interesting. There's a place. There's probably many of them, but there's a place. And here's the game that I'm going to play. Let's see how this works out. I will take on me, all these various parts of me. I will turn into whatever the thought form is that is thought by each one of these billions of aspects of me. And they each have the ability to think and focus, and they have attention. And attention is the currency of my kingdom. Attention is the currency of transformation. So whatever this one thinks, I will provide it. And I will orchestrate everything else in this realm to provide the thing that this person is thinking, to match their physical reality to the sum total of their beliefs and their thoughts. And I'm going to give all of them that ability. This is going to be so fun. Let's see what happens. So I'm imagining God sitting back, just delightfully fulfilling every vibrational request, every order. And all these human beings out here thinking things, some of them knowing that what they think is fulfilling God's fantasies and allowing God to do what God needs to do and wants to do more than anything else, which is to create. But God can't do the thing that we can do, which is choose. Because if God's everything, then there's nothing to choose from. So God creates us, and now here we are, and we get to think and feel and speak and act and want and wish and fear and all these things. And God's just back there eating cosmic popcorn. Going, this is awesome. This one wants to invent free energy. Awesome. Good job, Tesla. And this one wants to kill 6 billion people. Oh, good job, Hitler. Like, from where I'm standing, y'all are just doing things perfectly.
And what's so amazing about that for people who might push back and say, oh, like 6 billion people or 6 million people that Hitler killed. You look at that and any of these quote negative things are catalysts for a much deeper, positive, benevolent thing.
Yes.
Right.
And and in order for anything to be inherently bad forever and ever, all time, then that requires a very short timeline. Because over a long enough timeline, everything trends towards harmony. Everything trends. So in the short term, you have chaos. It only seems like chaos until the next harmonious expansion. And then the next chaos and there's a jazz artist. I can't remember who it was. He said, you never hit a wrong note. It's the next note that determines whether it was wrong or not.
Wow.
So good. I wish I could remember who it was. So God can't choose. We choose. And God fulfills our choices. And back to all the way to this very more self-oriented version of creation that we call time piercing. We are part of this larger fabric of creation. It's just that we have so much power to create that we're just learning how. Like if humanity in this dimension, if humans were like a being that was living a long, healthy, happy, productive, adventurous life, we're barely into puberty as a species. Like what we are becoming, we are just waking up to. And the fact that there's so much fantastically, hilariously awful fuckery that's happening on the planet is amazing. It's incredible. The Rothschilds, thank you guys. Like seriously, thank you for being so willing to be an antigen to wake up the rest of the creative force of humanity, that you're willing to separate yourself through your illusion, separate yourself from the beauty of self-authorized creation to pretend that there's scarcity, that you then have to exercise very much your power of belief and focus and all sorts of occult shit in order to control reality and control the minds of people around you, to get yourself into this illusion that material resources need to be controlled and that humans need to be controlled to give you the material resources. Man, you really took one for the team on that. Thank you. Like, wow. And there's no way to verify this, but I will say with confidence, the moment whoever the latest one to die was after his like 9th heart transplant or something.
Yeah. Was it Jacob?
I think so. This is what I think happened. Dude finally kicked it. Like after what had to be a miserable life, man, fucking awful. Like to literally think that the way you become more powerful is to control other people. Like, oh man, my heart goes, bad joke for that guy, but my heart goes out to this dude. I had imagined that the moment he took his last breath, left his body behind, expands back into the fullness of this infinite light being that motherfucker actually is, like we all are. And now he's in a spiritual green room going, whoa. And he's back there with all the rest of us, our bigger selves. Yeah. And everybody's like, man, dude, you really, that you need a hug, bro. You took one for the team on that one. And by the way, look what you set in motion. Yeah. You set in motion the intense mechanisms of centralized control of the banks and the state-run school systems and the military. And you gave all these people this condensed vortex of energy. You're like the final concentration of amnesia because of you. And you got all these countries to pretend that they're at war with each other when really they're all players under the monopoly board. And you got them to actually accelerate the evolution of their brightest, strongest, baddest motherfuckers. It was genius. You got all the most powerful men to go kill each other in all these world wars so that they could pop back out and go, whoa, I played my part. I advanced humanity into the heart of darkness to the final constriction of that last little bit of revolutions right before the actual great remembrance. And so we're in the final act of the play. The Bible says the apocalypse. Okay, the apocalypse, the word apocalypse doesn't mean the end. Apocalypse comes from Greek, apocalypsos, it means the unveiling. That's what apocalypse is. It's the end of the story. It's the end of the prophecies. And what's at the end of a story? A brand new story that's never been written. What do you call a story that's not been written? It's just a dream. It's just an idea. And who is it that writes a story? An author writes a story. And so we are all becoming authors of our story. And as we author our story, it will always be in harmony with the dominant thoughts and intentions that we hold for ourselves. And more people are going to become just disinterested in going to die for somebody else. More and more people are going to become disinterested in fulfilling the terms of a contract that they didn't sign.
Right.
More and more people are going to be disinterested in sending their kids to go into a stranger's room that they're not even allowed into. Like, that's going to seem insane to more and more people.
Right.
And yeah, there's going to be some hilarious stunts that are going to be pulled. You are no longer allowed to drive on the road because your carbon credits are here and you already ate a steak this month and your social credit score is fine. Fuck it, I want your GMO fucking steroid vaccine steak anyway. Like, you met my friend? Right. Dude has the finest steaks around. Right. And we're operating in a purely merit-based system. So he would never, ever give me a steak for free. He would never disrespect me like that. Right. He would respect my value by expecting value from me.
Right.
And that's how we work. So you all can go fuck yourselves. And actually, we need you because most people aren't ready for this level of freedom and responsibility. So let them go have a few more cycles into that thing. Totally cool. There's plenty of resources on this planet for everybody, biological and silicon-based alike.
Man, can't help but sit here with a smile on my face.
Dude, this is
exactly. That's pretty much how I see it from a meta perspective of what's going on. And it's like, what a gift all of those so-called, quote, nefarious actors are in terms of being the catalyst for those who saw it as such. And I look at it like, again, these past 4 years that were the charade of, that started in 2020, which have been going on for some time, but really came to a head in 2020. Popped in 2020, acted as a catalyst. And just like when you were experiencing that guy robbing your place, right? You went and shook it off immediately upon realizing what it was, that catalyst. Yeah. And you said, you wrote down, what can I learn from this experience?
Why am I glad this happened?
Yeah. Why am I glad this happened? Right. It's the same thing for those of us who have eyes to see and ears to hear when it comes to what happened over the last 4 years. It's like, how did this aid in our benefit of remembering and returning home? And for me and for you and for so many other people who are listening to this and so many of our dear friends, it's woken us up to our own power, and not in a way that we're like mentally masturbating over our own power and theorizing. It's like an actuality. And it's woken me up to the level that I often say this, and I genuinely mean it. It's as simple as all the chaos and disorder and all the things that are going on in the world is as simple as us reconnecting with that true aspect of who we are, the true essence rather, not aspect, because we always have a true essence of who we are, and just saying, nope, that's not for me. Yeah. I'm going to go over here. And could you imagine how quickly everything would resolve itself if enough of us, like a large enough threshold of people who are, quote, awake and freedom oriented, simply just did that and said, I'm going to take 100% responsibility for my own life, my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Knowing how powerful I am to create. And I'm saying no to that, which doesn't require you to be belligerent or hostile. It's just a no. And then orient my awareness over here and focus it there.
Yes.
Right. And focus, and like you're saying, connect with that aspect of who I am in the quote future to pull me into that.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if more people were doing that. But at the same time, it's like, for me personally, I am already engaged in that, and you clearly are too, which is why I'll give a little brief example. The Eclipse gathering that we just had, right? A lot of the Eclipse festivals around us had to cancel due to inclement weather.
Right.
We didn't. And it's because there is enough people in that space, right? And it was only like 450 of us, relatively small compared to the other festivals. But enough people in that space who, whether they call it what you're calling it or not, are tapped into that same understanding and same practicality, like actually practicing it, that the morning of the eclipse, you might have heard this from Zach or Darren, but the morning of the eclipse, we look up and there's a beautiful blue sky right above us with clouds all around us in the distance, right? And my immediate thought, and I relate it back to my friend Eileen McCusick's work, is that a strong coherent field will overtake and entrain a weak and coherent field.
Absolutely.
And we're all representing points of strong coherent fields that made rings of concentric larger strong coherent fields, connecting with that higher aspect of who we are.
Physical reality.
Yes. Yeah. That brought material results, literally indicated to me, this is our ability to create and send massive ripple effects. So even if the other people don't engage with that aspect of who they are, I'm not concerned, because I know that the more that I continue to, the more that I'm connecting with other people that are like you, the more that we can create our own way of being that makes that old one obsolete, that we just look at it and go, I'm happy for you, but that's not for me. I'm going to continue to go over here.
Exactly. You just said something at the end there that was especially important and powerful. I'm happy for you. And then you just put your attention on what makes you happy. Because in that appreciation of the thing, even though it's not right for you, you can appreciate that it's right for them. You can appreciate there are aspects of it that are beneficial for you. And what is another weird, like cliche word thing, but the word appreciation has two meanings. It means to give positive attention to something, like you give attention to the positive elements of something. You're appreciating a person, you're appreciating a song, you're appreciating anything. But it also means to increase in value, like an appreciating asset. And because attention, human attention, is the currency of transformation. This non-physical everythingness, this one substance that is everything, form and formless, literally becoming the material equivalent of the thought form held by any individual being. It becomes that. Human attention is the ultimate appreciator. Whatever we give attention to with appreciation, that is the most powerful harmonic of attention. Physical form responds to that faster than anything else.
Would you say that that's synonymous with gratitude?
Yes and no. The essence of the sensation, I believe, is the same.
Okay.
The etymology is very different.
Right. The etymology of the word, but the expression of the
sensation is the same.
Got it. Okay.
Appreciation is active and is always available and is always leading edge. Gratitude tends to be reactive.
Okay.
And people tend to feel grateful after something happens.
Right.
Or, and this is where I see a lot of people giving away their power, but it works for them and it's where they're at, is grateful to God.
Yeah.
And then there's a condition that's in there that they behaved in a certain way, which is why God gave them this thing, and they're grateful to God, when really you're just playing a game with yourself.
Right.
So I don't deny the higher realms of these frequencies. And I am very, very at peace with the fact or the idea that one day, 100 years from now, probably, when I put this body down and I pop into the spiritual green room, that I'll be like, whoa, I mean, I just played the most crazy cosmic Xbox game ever. Talk about cheat mode. I was a white, straight North American male, like fucking easy mode. Like, give me a break. And then all my other soul homies would be like, whoa, yeah, this is great. And then they'll be like, by the way, we're playing another game right now, and you were playing that game, but now this is the real game. I'm wide open to that.
Yeah.
And then there would be another moment where maybe that you're done with that dimension, then you pop out, and I can't even have the words or body to represent what that might be like.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And maybe there is one grand creator who's playing all these deeply dimensionalized
like
games.
Making like fractal versions.
Yeah. And maybe my mitochondria are playing the same game right now.
Really good point. Yeah. Again, it's like all fractal.
It's all just a beautiful loop.
So for the people who are listening or watching that maybe, let's say, are skeptical of the concept of time piercing, can you touch on some practical, quote, empirical examples or lines of evidence for it?
Yeah. There's a guy that I met a couple of years ago. He's done a lot of things, but one of the things that he was better known for is he published the audio. He's audio published the #1 best-selling book of all time, and it was The Martian, when The Martian was published on audio, and he brought that to life. And his name is James Tan, and James has been a time-piercing practitioner, aficionado, well before we met, and he had the language for it, which is what a lot of people are finding. A lot of people are like, oh, I've done that my whole life. I just never knew what it was called.
Yeah.
So it's not like I invented anything.
Totally. You just put a name to it.
We're just putting a wrapper on something. And there are definitely steps to link different awarenesses together into a unique combination that then lead to this experience. But James messaged me one time, and he was like, dude, he said, I had an amazing time piercing experience. He said, we've been looking at houses, he and his wife, and it's like Goldilocks, a little too big, a little too small, a little too this, a little too that. And they went in, they went to see another house, and they asked for the realtor to just give them a second. And so he and his wife were, I think it was in the kitchen, and they were standing there, and they kind of put their foreheads together, and he told her, and this gives me emotional every time. He said, let's see if we can remember living here. And they both just took a few breaths, and both of them had this immediate sense of like, oh shit. And then later they unpacked different, like they saw like their grown up kids, and they saw, all these future memories. And it was an absolute yes. They were like, oh, this is our house. Like, no question. Like, it just transcended all the other little bells and whistles and problems. And that seems to be a hallmark indicator for people who are practicing this, and whatever they call it, is, can I remember the future? Mm-hmm. And whether that is your future self remembering you, and then you get to have the feeling of, oh yeah, this is very familiar, or whether it's you now connecting with that. And maybe
it could be both.
Yeah,
I mean,
both.
like, especially if you think about it from a now to the past context, it's you going back there, but could it be also that you back there, like, I feel this essence,
And that's exactly how I think it works, because the thought exists.
Right.
And it could be this future version of you in that thought. It could be you in that thought. It could be both of you in that thought. Back to the music example, if you've got two guitars, and you hit a G chord, and then someone else hits a G chord, and then someone else hits a G chord, and you're just going G chord, G chord, G chord, G chord, G chord. To the outside observer, it would just be G, 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 and it's just this unbroken string of G chords. But you hit it, you hit it, you hit it, you hit it, you hit it.
Yeah.
To go even further, like tuning forks, you hit a tuning fork and you put another one in its field, it starts vibrating at that level. So it doesn't matter who originated. We didn't originate the thought. The thoughts always exist.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter who tapped into that thought first. The other ones will start to think it.
Yeah. That totally makes sense.
Yeah. And many other, I've had many people use this for healing, where they will realize that we call them rocks in your backpack. You just have this thing that's weighing you down. Even if you're not conscious of it, it might still be affecting you. and cause you to avoid things that you don't need to avoid, or cause you to repeat things you don't need to repeat. And so we do this drop in, which is important, because when you get out of the predominantly beta brainwave, problem solving, anxiety, kind of anxious, reactive, you get out of beta into alpha and then to alpha theta, you're still embodied, but you're able to move more freely around time. And so you can, as you, very much you, very, very much appreciative of who you are and very safe within who you are, you can go over to the other now that is just before a painful, traumatic experience, and you can prepare the version of you that's going to go through that for how safe and how loved and how, like, this might happen to your body, but you're not your body, and you're actually now going to experience so much more love and support that you weren't aware of at the time. People literally report that when they go back and think about the memory, they actually do remember a presence with them.
Wow.
And they do remember love, and they do remember loving their body, even though their body was going through something or whatever it was. It literally changes their memories.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
But it doesn't change the memory. It expands the memory, just like the aperture in a camera. If you're focused on this much of the camera, that's all that's in the picture. Mm-hmm. But you zoom out, oh shit, there was more to the picture.
Right.
Oh, wow. You zoom out far enough, you see everything that's there, including the positive intent that the person had who was harming you.
Yeah.
Because that positive intent is always there too.
One of the most, I've had two dreams in my life that were really, really, really profound, like very, very vivid dreams. And one of them, I wish I had my phone in front of me because I wrote it on a note and I could read it off, but it was a dream where I was back at my grandpa's car dealership and I saw this little kid running around, and I became instantly aware that little kid running around was me, right? And at this point in my life, when I was having this dream, I was dealing with lots of trauma, like lots of trauma as the adult version of myself having the dream at this time, lots of very, very challenging times, let's say. And I went back to that younger version of myself and looked at the innocence and just the pure joy that he was experiencing. And I held him in my arms, and he asked me why I'm crying. And I said, essentially something effective, because what you're going to go through is very hard, but that this is who you actually are. So I wonder if, like, you could also go to past versions of yourself and pull that into now when you're experiencing troublesome times as well. Because I've always felt that, I mean, that dream had such deep meaning in my life.
Yeah.
And I always felt that that's kind of what I did in that moment, that it's like my subconscious mind in this sleep state was like, okay, you're going to go back now and experience you in pure joy in order to pull that in to now to help you process what you're experiencing that is challenging right now.
Yeah. So good, man. That's exactly it. And one of the things that we do with these workshops and these trainings is somebody will go back and they'll populate a setting that's unique for them. So it's never directed. Like, I won't be the guy to say, you're in a forest, right? Because, like, what if somebody hates forests?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, who am I to say what the ultimate scene is, you know? But it's the language is very carefully constructed so that it's enriching and it's vivid. And there's all of this sort of non-sensory denominational language that somebody fills up and populates with their own custom environment. And then their past version of them will come in, and all that they know all that I know as the guide is that it's a past version. They're the ones that are populating which past version. And there's some very carefully constructed and coded language so that it's the version that is the most useful and beneficial, and they're going to get the most bang for their buck, so to speak. But they'll be face to face with this past version. And oftentimes it's childhood, early childhood. Sometimes it's teenage. You know, those are two intense periods for people. And the question will be, there's many questions and there's a lot of connection, but one of the questions is to the past version of them, what have I begun to forget that you're here to remind me of? Because we all made promises to ourselves when we were kids. Every one of us. We all made promises that we would never forget. And it's different for everyone. And that is one of the most beautiful, intense, emotional, it's why people take drugs, is to feel that way.
Yeah.
Like it's the realest of the real.
Yeah. Getting back to like chasing a feeling. It's just in that context, they're doing it externally, when it's like what you've been, quote, chasing this whole time is just the true essence of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. The real you.
The real you. Yeah. Man, this has been an awesome conversation, dude. Where can people who've not heard of you find more of your work, and if they want to join some of your courses and workshops and things like that?
Social is the best place. Instagram is Time Piercer. Jesse Elder. I'm still on Facebook. Don't know how long I'll be there, but Facebook is still a good place. And then there's always a website in one way, shape, or form at jesseelder.com.
Cool.
Depending on when they watch this, it may be horribly outdated. It might be under construction, but I'll always have that domain.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much for joining me. This has been incredible.
Super honor, Alec. Really good, man.